What's up, man? I thought today we'd talk about 22 ammo as part of our 22 for Survival series. So if that interests you, stay tuned. Welcome to the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, ballistics the right way with God Almighty at the center, biblical, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. Military, law enforcement, private security, contracting, lifelong hunter, competition shooter, blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and fingers for battle. Okay, on the 22, I have shot a lot of 22. I've shot a lot of 22 ammo since I was a kid. Like many people that start shooting as a kid, I started shooting with a 22. Don't know if it was the first gun I ever shot, but one of the first guns I ever shot regularly. In fact, one of the very first guns I ever bought with my own money is a Ruger 10/22. It's hanging behind me on the wall. Why? Because I still shoot it all the time. I've had that thing since I wasn't old enough to buy a gun myself. And I could only venture to guess how many rounds have been through that gun. And so many others. I've competed with the 22. Now, military, law enforcement, private security, contracting, I was never issued a 22 for combat or fighting or kicking down doors. That's just not a thing I've ever done. I mostly use it for training for their centerfire counterparts or small game hunting. Alright, but today's episode is about ammo, and I think I'm going to start off by covering shorts and longs in the 22 rimfire. Of course, 22 long rifle is a standard, so if I don't specifically say shorts or longs or 22 Magnum, then I am specifically talking about 22 long rifle. 22 shorts, less powerful than the 22 long rifle. Don't make the mistake of assuming they're subsonic. A lot of times they're shorter and they have a much lighter bullet, so they can still be supersonic. They're going to have less powder, they're going to be lighter weight. If you have a manually operated gun that's designed for them, they can work in the same gun that will shoot a long or a long rifle, if it's designed for it. Many lever actions, bolt actions will fire them. Most semi-autos will not unless you single load them. They are a bit lighter, but 22 long rifle is so light already. I don't know that that's a good reason for them. A good reason for them would be when you want less power, right? Hunting in the suburbs, taking care of pests inside a barn or something like that, shooting indoors. That can be a really good use for them. If they are right, subsonic or something like a short Calibri or something like that. I guess a Calibri is not technically a short, but another one would be the long. Really the only reason for a long would be if you can't find 22 long rifle for a long, long time. Kind of after the market collapse in 2008. For some reason, a lot of ammo was hard to get for a while, but for years, 22 long rifle was really hard to get. But you could sometimes find 22 long. And if you have a gun that will fire shorts, longs, and long rifles, it gives you some flexibility. That's really the only practical reason I can think of where you'd want a long over a long rifle, is that you just can buy a bunch of them or you stumble into a bunch of them. And the fact that you have a rifle that can shoot them, that's not a bad thing. 22 Magnum is a great cartridge. It's great for varmint control, pest control. It is quite a bit more powerful than 22 long rifle. That, though, I think is more of a detriment than an advantage in a survival situation. Where the 22 long rifle shines is hunting small game. If I'm hunting small game to eat it, I don't want to destroy so much of it that it's not much good to eat. Right? If I'm shooting a Eurasian collared dove, I'd much rather shoot it with a 22 long rifle than a 22 Magnum because I want to eat it. I don't want to destroy it. And it's generally about the same grain weight bullets, and you're shoving them at quite a bit higher velocity. You can do a lot more damage. I don't generally think the juice is worth the squeeze there. 22 Magnum is a great cartridge, I think. It's great for varminting. It's quite a big step up. Right? I would take shots with a 22 Magnum on, let's say, a coyote that I wouldn't take with a 22 long rifle. My max effective range on shooting prairie dogs, which is something I really enjoy doing, is a lot greater with a 22 Magnum than a 22 long rifle. It is more powerful. It is a more powerful round. But I think in general, you're giving up more than you're gaining. If you were just talking about defense, well, yeah, 22 long rifle is not great for defense. 22 Magnum is generally going to be better. But again, giving up the flexibility. The 22 long rifle you shouldn't pick because it's a great defensive caliber anyway. But 22 Magnum is quite a bit more powerful. I believe I've done a standalone episode on the 22 mag. But now let's get to the 22 long rifle. There's a lot of different ammo. The 22 shot shells, those are mostly good for pest control. Again, indoors, really close up, rats, mice, and you might think, well, that's dumb. One, I would say, I really hope you're never in a survival situation where you have to consider eating a rat or dying. But what I will say is, in a scenario not quite that bad, disease, bacteria, things like hantavirus or the bubonic plague, they're spread by rodents. Rodents are filthy, unclean animals. Why I don't consider them food. That's why the Bible doesn't consider them food. They carry a lot of disease. They're nasty. Disease kills a lot of people, a lot more historically than bullets, even after bullets were invented. Keeping pests out of living quarters, right, that's a big deal. So yeah, 22 shot shells for that would be okay. Really close up. And for rats and mice and things, small snakes indoors, yeah, they're good for that when you don't want to do more damage. So for that, the 22 shot capsules are okay. For anything else, not really, in my opinion. Now let's talk about ammo. What kind of ammo is best for you in your 22 survival situation? Well, whatever your gun likes. Right? There's no simple answer. I can't be like, oh, buy this. I don't know if your gun's going to like it. Even if you have the same model of gun as me, I have Ruger 1022s. I'm blessed to have several. Doesn't mean that whatever ammo my gun likes, your gun is going to like. Your gun may not. It's been made for decades, if I remember, since like the 60s. There's lots of different makes and models. And just some that came off the assembly line a day or two apart may like different kinds of ammo. That's just the way rifles are. And one could cycle and be more dependable with one kind of ammo than another. So you should test them. However, I'm not brand loyal. I get no kickbacks. I take no bribes from ammo companies. But I will give you some really good choices. Kind of the gold standard, CCI mini mags. Right? If you don't know where to start with CCI mini mags. They're fantastically good ammo. They generally work pretty well out of semi-autos and everything else. CCI mini mags. They make a bunch of different ones now. The two main flavors, the chocolate and vanilla, right, of days of yore was the hollow points and the solids, CCI mini mags. And they still make those. And they're great. They also make like segmented rounds. If you're varmint hunting or something, you might want those. I think they make some California Save the Condors rounds. If you got to shoot those, you got to shoot those. I'm a big fan of solid copper rounds and center fires for hunting, for high-end hunting rounds. Not so much for this. But CCI mini mags, they're great. If you want a little bit less power, the CCI standard velocities can be really good. Probably my second choice for this would be Aguila Super Extra. The Aguila Super Extras, 38 grain hollow points, I believe. They're phenomenal. They're fantastic. They also make like a 40 grain solid. Either one of those, depending on if you want a hollow point or you want a solid. They are very good. They can be a bit cheaper. They are very good ammo. Let me talk about something you probably don't hear much when choosing ammo. How is it packaged? If we're talking about for survival, if you're just talking about plinking and range practice, yeah, get the big bulk packs of ammo. They're fantastic. Even for your go-to survival gun, if it's the same ammo, get the big giant bulk packs, the bricks, for practice. If it's like the ammo you're grabbing for the peanut butter and chocolate hitting the fan, though, even if it's the same ammo, I would encourage you to have a decent stockpile of 22 rounds that are individually packaged, such as the sleeves or the small boxes of CCI mini mags or Aguila Super Extra. Why, if it's the same ammo? Because the stuff in the bulk packs is knocking around, rubbing against itself, can be bent, can cause feeding issues, can get misshapen. And yeah, if you're bringing it home and setting it in your garage or in your house, and it sits in one place, and then, you shoot it 2 months later, no big deal. If you're talking about ammo that you're going to have in your truck rattling around for a year or two, bouncing around, jostling around, or something that's going to be in your pocket or your pack for months or years, I really encourage you to get the individually wrapped, whatever ammo that is. CCI Mini Mags, Agilo Super Extra. Many of the ammo, the mainstream 22 ammo that you're going to see, you'll have options for how it's packaged. So don't overlook that. Again, if you want to buy bulk pack stuff for practice and shooting just for fun, that's fantastic. That's what it's for. But if you want like go-to ammo for your pack, for your truck, for your bug out bag, I would encourage you to look at some of the individually wrapped or individually packaged. Like each round in its own place, separated, really tightly packaged in rows so it's not bouncing around. So just something to consider I don't often hear discussed. Now, CCI Mini Mags are fairly hot. They're not the hottest though. The Winchester Wildcats are pretty good. The Remington Vipers, Hyper Velocity, these can be really good. And what's cool about these is where most 22 long rifle is just a round nose bullet or a hollow point round nose, these are truncated cone. I don't know if they're still called the Viper, but they make a solid and a hollow point, but they are like a little baby Keith style semi-wad cutter, like Elmer Keith style semi-wad cutter. They're like a flat cone. And in larger bullets, those tend to do a lot better than just a round nose bullet when it comes to terminal performance. And these are loaded pretty hot. However, if you're talking about a semi-auto, you need to make sure that they feed. Obviously, they could hang up in some semi-autos where a round nose bullet will do better. Obviously, round, usually, all of the things being equal, will feed better. But you may find a semi-auto where the Viper style, the Keith style semi-wad cutters feed just fine. And then they have a lot of advantage. If you're firing it through like a revolver, it doesn't. It's a moot point. If you're firing it through a lever action or a bolt action, it still might give you feeding issues. It may not. So you need to test it. Well, you need to test everything, but you get what I'm saying there. The Federal Champion ammo. It's fairly mild. I think it'd still be considered high velocity, but fairly pedestrian. Good ammo. Generally is fairly accurate. Here's one that for years I thought was garbage, because for years it may have been, especially when I was a kid, but the Remington Golden Bullet. Again, this comes in different kinds of packaging, anything from a big bucket to little small boxes. But I've shot a lot of this in the past year because it was cheap. They had it at Walmart. I could get a bucket of it at like $1,400 and some rounds for $100. And I shot a lot of it, and I was actually impressed with the quality of it. It's not CCI Mini Mags, but it's pretty good for the money. It's decent, works decent. It's very good ammo for practice. I would not consider it my go-to grab and go, count my life on it ammo. Oh, and it's the Remington Yellow Jacket is the hollow point. It's got a different name. CCI Stingers. Now, I don't know if you technically would consider a CCI Stinger a long rifle. I think it actually has a little bit longer case. Some semi-autos, especially like match grade, or not even semi-auto, some really tight chamber match grade guns recommend, I believe, not firing CCI Stingers. So you need to do your own research on that. But CCI Stingers, a little bit longer case, a little bit lighter bullet. Now, I probably should have given you some raw numbers. If we consider CCI Mini Mag and I do my gold standard, and it's a fairly hot round, not the hottest, but fairly hot, right? That's a 36 grain hollow point. If we're comparing the hollow point round, a 36 grain hollow point at 1260 feet per second. So 36 at 1260 for 127 foot-pounds. The Stinger, 32 grains at 1640 feet per second for 191 foot-pounds. Now, foot-pounds aren't all that matters, but that's quite a bit of a step up in foot-pounds. And keep in mind, these velocities are for rifles. You're not going to get anywhere near that velocity out of a handgun. And it's not apples to apples because you're going from a 36 grain to a 32 grain. But yeah, you may want, if the 22 is your survival gun, you may give some serious consideration to the Stinger if you want a lighter, faster bullet. Now, there's a lot of really high-end target ammo, like for competition shooting, that's can be hyper accurate. That doesn't mean it's going to be. Your gun has to like it, but it's generally going to be very reliable, very accurate, and very expensive. Stuff like the Ely, the Wolf. Wolf generally in a lot of other calibers is like the cheap garbage ammo, but Wolf makes some really high-end 22 ammo. One of the ones that's really good and hot, the Winchester Wildcat ammo. That lists a 40 grain bullet at 1,300 feet a second for 150 foot-pounds. That's pretty decent if you want a pretty good balance of 40 grain, which is on the heavier end for 22 long rifle. It doesn't sound heavy, but for 22 long rifle, it's on the heavier end. There's some heavier stuff out there, but in general, that's a heavy bullet at 1,300 feet a second for 150 foot-pounds. It comes in the bigger boxes. It also comes in the 100-round sleeves like the CCI, so they're really good packaging. There is the punch ammo. I actually have some of this, tested it for my wife. She actually carries a 22 long rifle handgun. It's okay. It's decent. It's expensive. Now, is this what you should be stockpiling for the apocalypse? I don't know. It's pretty expensive. If it's what your handgun likes and it's your day-to-day carry gun and you carry a 22 long rifle, which I don't recommend. I don't pretend it's as good as a 9mm, but I carry a full-size combat handgun day-to-day at work with my gun belt as a private security contractor and off of work most of the time. But not everybody's me, right? My wife is not that. But she likes to shoot and practice quite a bit with her 22 handgun. She even competed with it last year. She shoots it fairly competently. If it's your go-to day-to-day carry gun, and that's what you consider survival, like you just need to make it home to the suburbs from your work, if there's another summer of love or winter of love or whatever, and there's mostly peaceful protests with people burning stuff down and looting and rioting and using women's bodies without their consent, Antifa, Trantifa, whatever is going on, and that's your idea of survival, and it's just what you're going to have and or a loved one, a teenage daughter or a wife or something is going to train with, yeah, then get really high-end quality personal defense ammo. The Federal Punch would fit into that category. It's also fairly light, which I find intriguing, but again, I have some of it. I've shot it. It shoots fine. It's 29 grains at 1080, and you might think, well, that's not very powerful, but remember, this is for a handgun, so they're giving you handgun velocity here. There's also the CCI Uppercut, since we're on the train of high-end ammo for like 22 handguns for defense. That's also a 32 grain, but this is a jacketed hollow point. The Punch is not a hollow point. That's a 32 grain at 950. Again, handgun velocity. There's also, looking this up around, I don't have any experience with this round, the Winchester Silvertip Defense Fragmenting Hollow Point, 37 grain. Ooh, and it lists 37 grain at 1060. I don't know how I feel about that. You could, if you're talking about carrying it in a handgun for defense 22 long rifle, a lot of people just aren't going to hunt, even if they have a fantasy of it in the apocalypse. I grew up hunting. I love hunting. Ate elk last night for dinner. But a lot of people, they're just not going to hunt there. In a city, they're just probably not going to hunt. It's not part of their repertoire. Talking about a handgun for defense and a 22 long rifle is what they have. This is probably more what comes to mind when they think of survival. Now, for a handgun, you can, I would honestly, not that you shouldn't consider it, but I think it's probably a 50-50 wash, and I've considered it quite a bit if you're going to use it, because obviously my wife carries it. I have, it's not my general go-to, but I do have a 22 survival gun, a 22 Ruger 1022 takedown. I keep it pretty well stocked in its own bag. But I think it's honestly a wash if you're considering for self-defense, if you want a solid or a hollow point. Honestly, I think there's merit there either way. It's, do you want penetration or do you want expansion? Now, in general, with something like a 9mm, I would never tell you, very special circumstance, to carry full metal jackets or solids. But 22 long rifle is nowhere near the amount of power. You're talking, what do we say? Rough number, 150 foot-pounds compared to 3 to 400, maybe over 400 if it's a hot load in a 9mm. It's not comparing the same. I think there is some real merit to be had for a solid in a 22 long rifle. You do your own research on that. If more penetration is important to you, go with the solid. If maximum expansion is important to you, maybe go with something lighter and hollow point like a CCI Stinger. More important than all that is to make sure that that ammo goes well, pairs well with your gun, meaning it's reliable out of your gun. Not just when it's clean and you went to the range and you cleaned it, but like when you've been carrying it for a month and it's nasty and dirty, and does it feed and cycle it then? Subsonics, let's talk about those. Subsonics can be useful. I think suppressors are mostly a gimmick, but there are some use for them, especially if you live in a city. I don't think there's really any use for them on a 22 handgun other than just it's cool to shoot steel with a suppressed 22 handgun. The whole point of a handgun is you can have it on you and easily accessible. And I know that they make small 22 cans, but it's just, no. Whatever the size of that can is, you're better off with just a larger size handgun, even if it's a 22, in my opinion. Already dealing with really low energy. A really short barrel with a suppressor on it, I just get the longer barrel. Get the more velocity out of your 22 long rifle, even out of a handgun. Out of a handgun, they just don't make sense to me. Out of a rifle, you might make the case that a 22 suppressor, fine. And for that, if you don't know, even if you suppress it, if it's supersonic, you're still going to get that crack. So if you are going to suppress a 22 rifle, I could see some real merit there for subsonic 22 long rifle. Subsonic, Mach 1, generally 1,000 feet a second is a good number. It's actually a little bit more than that, like 1050, and that depends on atmospheric conditions, but let's say 1,000 feet a second because it's easy to remember. If you remember the velocities of a lot of the 22 ammo we talked about heretofore, then you're losing a lot of velocity and a lot of energy. Now you could say, why not just shoot a heavier bullet? Because it doesn't really matter. You're shooting the speed of sound anyway. Why not go with a heavier bullet? Well, because twist rate. Now, you can, if you stabilize a much heavier bullet, if you go with a much faster twist rate, but that's not really a thing in 22 long rifles unless you go really, really hyper specialized, which is outside of the scope of today's discussion. We're talking about normal guns for normal people that normal people would buy. Most of those have around a 1 in 16 twist because they're designed for, on the heavy end, generally a 40 grain bullet. You might get by with a little bit heavier, but that's really it. So you're giving up quite a bit of power on a round that's already pretty marginal. Now, depending on what you're doing with it, right? If you're shooting pigeons in the suburbs and cul-de-sacs in the city, 22 subsonic with a suppressor is going to be just fine for that. It's going to be plenty. So I think there can be some merit there for the 22 subsonics. Make sure they work, especially if you're talking a semi-auto. And consider, it might not sound loud, but in the middle of a very quiet forest, the action of a semi-auto slamming back and forth is pretty loud on its own. So that's also something to consider. I guess I should cover just straight lead bullets. A lot of your high-end match bullets are going to be straight lead bullets, meaning like no coating. Very few, if any, 22 long rifle ammo is going to have actual copper jackets or gilding metal jackets. What it is a copper wash. That said, just straight lead, generally fine, right? And if you're talking about super accurate, like Olympic grade ammunition, most of that's just going to be straight lead. Because it's simpler, and generally, all of the things being equal, simpler is more consistent in manufacturing because there's less to do, less to go wrong. And on the reverse of that, a lot of your dirt cheap bulk ammo is just going to be straight lead. Now, I don't generally like to shoot straight lead ammo because I shoot a lot and practice a lot, and I have gotten barrels so dirty and nasty that there's so much lead caked in the inside of the barrel that bullets are coming out in pieces. That's a real thing if you shoot a lot. I'm talking about like competition shooting a lot, high volume shooting, to the point where you can't get a bore snake or you can't get a cleaning rod in there without pounding it with something. So for that reason, I don't generally like lead ammo. Now, if you're going to keep your gun clean, then that's fine. But just be aware of that. In general, the copper wash stuff, the coated stuff like the CCI Clean, which is poly-coated, like a plastic coating, generally going to be cleaner in your gun. So just keep that in mind. Talking about just straight lead rounds, so one of the classics that's been around a long time is the Remington Thunderbolt. It's not a bad round. It's nothing special. It's 40 grain solid lead. Not even like copper washed or anything. It's decently hot. It's not the hottest, but it lists here 40 grains at 12.55 for 140 foot-pounds. It's okay, and it'll probably work in semi-autos. It's a fairly common round, fairly affordable. Oh, one that's also been around a long time and is generally pretty accurate because it's marketed as a match ammo, but it's a very affordable match ammo, is the Federal Auto Match. So if you're looking for high volume, cheap but accurate 22, that auto match is fairly good. Generally pretty accurate. Also just a lead round. Now guys, there is a lot of different 22 ammo out there. It's one of the most popular calibers on the planet. I'm not going to cover all of them, but I covered a lot of them that have been around a long time. Some of the newer tailor-made self-defense one, because that's really kind of a new thing. A lot of people for a long time carried, handguns with CCI mini mags and CCI stingers, and those worked okay, and they worked fine. Probably they carried also with just whatever they had, or whatever worked in their gun. But we've seen a lot of just specifically tailor-made 22 ammo for defense. So that's kind of new. Other than that, I covered some of the standards that have been around for a long time. CCI mini mag, Winchester Wildcats, Remington Thunderbolts, Remington Golden Bullets, Federal Champion, trying to give them a fair shake. What should you shoot? Whatever shoots well out of your gun. Whatever's reliable. That's the number one thing, reliability, especially in a 22. What's reliable out of your gun? Not what some GunTube glitterati said, not what I said. What shoots good out of your gun? My general go-to, I've said, a starting place for me, CCI Mini Mags or Gila Super Extra. But that doesn't mean you should shoot those. If they don't function out of your gun, then you obviously shouldn't shoot or stockpile those. You should get out and train. It's one of the great things about the 22. One of the things I love the 22 for. One of the things I love about it, it's affordable to train with. You can go out in an afternoon and shoot 500 rounds of ammo in recoil and cost of price per round, right? If you just have a blue sky budget, it doesn't really matter. You can, have all the money in the world to shoot and train with. That's great, but a lot of people don't. And if a lot of times I train with a 22 because it doesn't matter. I'm doing quick draw from 3 yards, all right? Just working on my draw to get faster, faster, faster. I waste the 9mm or the 45 ammo when I can shoot 22. If I'm working on rifle fundamentals, I like to compete. Looking forward to this year's season of CMP, Civilian Marksmanship Program, with service rifle, CMP high power. But I can do my marksmanship fundamentals with that Ruger 1022. So why not? Right? There's a time and a place to train with the gun that I'm actually going to shoot in competition, or the gun that I might have at work. But if I'm working on just the fundamentals, like if I need to work on something's going on with my kneeling position, I can do that with a 1022 at 50 yards and good accurate ammo. So get out there and train and shoot. It's one of the great things, again, about the 22. So hopefully this gives you a better understanding of some of the 22 ammunition out there, and you get out there. Buy a couple of boxes of each. Shoot for groups. Shoot off a bench. I often tell you get off the bench. But yeah, when you're sighting in your gun and shooting for groups, shoot off a bench. Then when your gun is sighted and is zeroed with the ammunition that it likes, get off the bench and do some training. And do some stockpiling of that ammo. So that you and I don't contribute to an ammo shortage. When ammo is hard to get, we're not out there also trying to buy ammo because we have plenty of them. We're like, whatever. I can still train. Because I have a decent amount of 22 and it's not so expensive that I can't store quite a bit of it. Just some thoughts on 22 ammo. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate all that you do. Your tactical tip of the day. You're shooting a lot of 22, especially out of a handgun or a semi-auto. You can get some malfunctions, especially if you're shooting a lot in a day and your gun's going to get really dirty. One of the things that can help, if you got a magazine, a lot of 22 magazines will have a hole in the side. Have little tabs you can pull up and down with your fingers. If they do, just put a drop of oil every 3 or 4 rounds on the case. A lot of the malfunctions in that is that the chamber gets really dirty and the rounds get hung up and cause a double feed or a failure to extract. Well, a little drop of CLP or something can keep that chamber going a lot longer. On the case, not the bullet. But that's just a tip if you're going to be shooting, hundreds and hundreds of rounds. That's just a good tip. And then for your tactical verse of the day, they're all old, right? They're 2,000 years old, but a classic. I've probably said it before, but I just read it before I started the podcast. God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Therefore, Humble yourself under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time, casting all your care upon him, for he cares for you. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Resist him, steadfast in the faith. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.